Hi everyone, this is Allison, and this is going to be a video just covering O codes, which is pregnancy and delivery codes. There is a lot to get through here, so I do want to warn you it's going to be a little bit longer, so either buckle in or plan to pause it. I also want to kind of explain that when I do these videos, I do not go through your textbook first. I don't want to follow the same pattern that they do or explain things the same way they do. I want to give you a different view of it. And so that's why it probably doesn't follow along exactly the way your textbook does. But I'm hoping that's actually a benefit to you. So a few things I want to cover, just the basics of the guidelines, because there are a lot of them. Puerperium, that's how you say that word. And I know that's a tricky one if you're not used to it or if you haven't heard it. That is a very specific medical term that relates to the time after mother's delivered to about 6 weeks, and it's specifically referencing when the reproductive organs move back into place. So that's what that word means if you're not familiar. It's important to remember that O codes are for the mother's chart only. You are not going to put any O codes on the baby's chart. After that baby is born, they will have their own codes, and usually those start out in section P. But before the baby is born, everything is going to be coded to the mother. We don't code anything independent to that baby. It's happening within the mother's body, and so even if it's a problem just with that infant that hasn't been born yet, we're still coding it to the mother. Something to be on the lookout for, because I'm sure you'll get a question about this, if not in your homework, then probably on the national exam, is the difference between Z37 and Z38. So category Z37 refers to a live birth. That's the outcome of delivery. So the mother's been through delivery. What was the outcome? That's what Z37 references. Z38 is live born. So that references the infant was live born. And then it'll specify within both those categories if it's a single, twin, triplet, etc. But you need to make sure you understand that Z38 does never goes on the mother's chart, and Z37 never goes on the infant's chart, because they will try to trip you up. Regardless of what you're coding, what condition, in the O codes, you're always going to need to code the trimester or the outcome of the delivery. So make sure you're familiar with the weeks of trimesters, and remember that here where it will say like up to 14 weeks. So if it says 14 weeks, we're in the second trimester. If it's anything up to 14 weeks, 13 weeks and 6 days, that's still in that first trimester. But as soon as it says 14 weeks, you bump up, and the same with the third trimester. So keep that in mind. And oftentimes they'll just say first trimester, not semester, first trimester, second trimester, etc. But sometimes they will give you the weeks of gestation. If you do know the weeks, then you need to include a code from category Z3A, and I'll go into more detail on that later. So you know the exact week. And oftentimes this will come into play with deliveries. If the mother delivers at 37 weeks versus 39 weeks, there's actually a lot of different things going on there. So insurance might want to know, and it's just good for the medical record to make sure they know at what time in their pregnancy they delivered. If you're looking up diagnoses in this section, the main term is usually going to be pregnancy or delivery, so that might be helpful. So it'll likely be like pregnancy, and then the subterm is going to be complicated by, or delivery complicated by, or if it's like a simple situation, might be delivery, and then the subterm is vaginal. But most of the time, one of those two words is going to be the main term. So that simplifies things a little bit. The guidelines also specify that O codes are going to take sequencing priority over other codes. So if you are getting, 4 or 5 different codes from different sections and one of them's an O code, 9 times out of 10, that code is going to be the first listed diagnosis because obviously anything that affects a pregnant woman is affecting her pregnancy. So we want to make sure that's first listed. And then there's also a lot of conditions that might have a code in a different chapter, but there's a specific code for that condition occurring in pregnancy. Things like diabetes, hypertension, anything like that is going to have a code specific to pregnancy. So diabetes in pregnancy is going to have an O code rather than you having to code pregnancy and then in addition to that, diabetes. So make sure you look for that first. It doesn't always happen, but a lot of times it does. Some things you might want to make note of. If there is a normal outpatient prenatal visit, there's no complications, then your primary code, your first listed diagnosis, is going to be Z34, a code from that category. And then it'll probably specify on trimester after that. But you'll definitely start with Z34. Usually Z codes are not going to be first listed, but in pregnancy and delivery, there are a lot of situations where we actually do end up using Z codes as the first listed diagnosis. So if it's a normal prenatal visit, just a checkup, you're going to use Z34 as the primary diagnosis. If there's a high-risk pregnancy, that doesn't necessarily mean there's something terrible going on. It could be high risk due to age or history of cancer or was type 1 diabetic or something like that. And they still have a perfectly healthy pregnancy, are just going for their routine visit. They will have the first list diagnosis as 009, and then there's going to be additional characters to specify the trimester, but that would be the first listed diagnosis. It's also helpful to note that pregnancy over age 35 is considered a complication. It is called elderly. It does not mean you're elderly if you're 35 and you had a baby, but that is a complication of age. And then it's expected to be 35 at the time of delivery. So if they're 34 during the pregnancy, but they're anticipating to be 35 at the delivery, that would still be complication of age. And then the same goes for girls who are under age 16. So if they're anticipated to be under age 16 at the time of delivery, then the complication would be young. And that would be, so it would still qualify as a high-risk pregnancy either way. Okay, so the easiest, most simple delivery that you're going to code is going to be a full-term normal vaginal delivery, no complications. Easy peasy, right? At least easy to code. And so that is going to be 080, and that's always going to be the principal diagnosis, and it will be paired with Z37.0, and that's single live birth. So there's no complications, no tearing, nothing like that is going on. Those two codes are going to go together, and that's going to be 080 and Z37.0. If the mother had a complication during the pregnancy, but it's resolved, maybe she had like dizzy spells or had high blood pressure at some point, but then it resolved and the pregnancy continued without issue, it didn't have any effect on the delivery, you can still use 080 as that primary diagnosis. If there's any other complication that's come up during the delivery or is mentioned, you can't use 080. You're going to have to use that complication as the primary. So 080 is not going to be used in conjunction with any complications at all. So you're just going to have to drop it out if you do have even just laceration or anything like that. If they have an unrelated condition from a different chapter, but it's not complicating the pregnancy, they can still use 080. So they might have some other, maybe they have some vision problem or something like that, but it's not complicating the pregnancy, has no impact on their health, then you can still use 080. If a mother has a normal delivery outside the hospital, so maybe there's a home birth or some other situation, I know there's like birthing centers Doulas have their own facilities now sometimes, and then they come to the hospital just for regular care afterwards. Then you can use code Z39.0, and I left out the E on code, but that's code Z39.0. So that would be the principal diagnosis in that situation. And so you might get that. Home births are becoming more and more popular, particularly like COVID times. People don't want to go to the hospital by themselves if they can't have visitors. So I'm sure that's going to be an increase in home births. But then they want to check in at the hospital and make sure they got follow-up care. So that would be Z39.0, and that would be the principal diagnosis. All right, so additional guidelines, and there's a lot of these, so I'm just trying to, get through them. If a mother is admitted due to a complication, whatever caused her to be admitted is going to be the principal diagnosis. So it's not going to be pregnancy. It's going to be a complication of pregnancy at that point. If there is, if she has a delivery during that time, so she's admitted due to a condition and then she delivers the baby during that time, whatever caused her to be admitted is going to be the principal diagnosis. If there's several things that she's admitted for, so maybe she has high blood pressure and hypertension and whatever else she's having, the one that's most related to the delivery is going to be the principal diagnosis. If she's admitted for a complication or a condition and that condition necessitates a C-section during that admission, then the condition will be the first listed diagnosis. It won't be the C-section. It'll be the condition that caused her to need the C-section. So you'll likely go condition, then C-section, and then the outcome of delivery. If the admission was unrelated to the condition that caused the C-section, the reason for the admission should be the principal diagnosis. So if she's admitted for something totally different and then develops another condition and then has the C-section, you would start with that principal diagnosis. Maybe she has hypertension and then her water broke for some other unrelated reason and she needed to have a C-section. You would start with the reason she was admitted, which would be the hypertension. All this is very complicated. I promise you we will go through examples. Maybe not this complicated, but we'll go through some. Just another little guideline they have, if there's a complication and delivery occurs and there's a code that says the complication in childbirth rather than just a regular O code or trimester code, then you should use that in childbirth. So that makes it even more specific because we always want to use the more specific code if we can. All right, so this is what I really want you to see because this is what you likely need to write. Actually, I'm not saying likely, you definitely need to write it in your ICD-10. This is going to be your checklist when you're doing a delivery. You need to check the type of delivery and so if it's going to be a normal vaginal single live birth, it's going to be that 080. If it's a C-section, it's going to be a different code. If it's a delivery with a complication, it's going to be another code besides that. Okay, sorry, I had to pause it for a second because there was like a ton of sirens going off in my neighborhood and it was really loud. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to code is the type of delivery. If it's a normal delivery, you use that 080. If there's a complication, you're going to do the primary complication as the very first code. So whatever's the main thing, that will be your first code. And then after that, you will have any additional complications. So oftentimes there'll be like a very serious complication. And then additionally, there'll be some tearing or something like that, a laceration. And so that would be the next code. And then after that, you'll need to code the weeks of gestation if it's known. And this is Z3A, and that's on page 1566. You want to make a note of that because it is hard to find if you aren't used to it. And then you want to know the outcome of delivery. So that's the that's the format you're going to follow every time if you can. And I would just write these down because I'm going to show you when I go to the document camera, I'm not going to go and look up weeks of gestation in the alpha. I'm not going to look up outcome of delivery in the alpha. I know from the guidelines, these are things I need to add. So I'm just going to automatically go do it. Okay. Because I don't want to do something arbitrary and waste your time. It's in the guidelines. We know we need to do it. Let's make a note of it and follow these steps by step. Okay. Okay. So this first example, I'm not going to go to the document camera for it. I'm going to let you go ahead, look through this and see if you can figure out what the codes are going to be. So patient is admitted for delivery at 39 weeks. Patient had a healthy pregnancy with no known complications. Patient delivers a single live female with no complications or tearing. So very straightforward. So if you want to pause it now, see if you can figure it out, go for it. Okay, but these are the things following our step-by-step guide. Here's what we're going to do. Type of delivery, it was normal and complicated, single vaginal delivery. Okay. Were there additional delivery complications? No. What were the weeks of gestation? 39 weeks. Outcome of delivery was a single live-born infant. Okay. So based on what we've gone through, you should be able to figure this out. That the correct answers are going to be uncomplicated delivery at 39 weeks, single live-born infant. We have that 080 is going to be the uncomplicated delivery, and then the weeks of gestation is right here, and then single live-born infant. Occasionally, you won't put in this middle one. Mark it here. Occasionally, you won't need this. It just depends on which insurance you're working with, what your facility's policies are. But when we're talking about national exam, usually they're going to do as specific as possible. So this is going to be the most correct answer right here. Okay. All right. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so patient is admitted for routine delivery at 38 weeks. Patient labors for 6 hours and delivers healthy live-born male. Patient experiences first-degree tearing, which does not require sutures. So still a pretty straightforward situation, but let's go through what we're going to look at. So the type of delivery was a delivery that's complicated by a first-degree perineum laceration. Very, very common. Were there additional delivery complications? No, doesn't sound like anything else was happening. Just a normal delivery with some tearing, which there's tearing is not going to be the medical term. It's still going to be laceration. And then weeks of gestation, we know 38 weeks. So still full term. Additionally, not going to be a complication there. And the outcome was single live-born infant. So let's go check it out. And I will switch to the document camera. If you want to pause now and try to find the answers, go for it. Okay, so this is what we have. Our type of delivery, weeks of gestation, single live-born infant. I'm going to go up to the O codes first so I can show you how I documented it or how I wrote notes for it. So right on the first page, which is 1120, I wrote those steps. So that way I know. These are the steps I need to follow when I'm doing a delivery, okay? But I'm still going to start in the alpha just so we can make sure we're doing it correct. But I have a note here in case it's uncomplicated, 080, right? But I am going to start with the alpha for this first one. I'm going to look at delivery complicated by laceration of perineum, first degree. See if we can find it. page 191, you're looking at delivery. And we're looking at complicated by, it's got a whole bunch of different things. We have complicated up here at the top, complicated by laceration. And there's a whole bunch more specific ones, but we just know perineal, perineum as well. That's going to be the most common one. If there's no specification of what kind of tearing in a delivery, you can be fairly certain that's what it is. So they'll want to specify for these other ones. But generally, if they just say patient experienced first degree, second degree tear, this is what they're talking about. So perineum, first degree, and 070.0. So let's down and go see what else we need to do. Make sure. So I said 0, but it's 070.0. So make sure you know the difference between your O's and your zeros. So let's go back to our O section. So here's 070 and 070.0, first degree perineal laceration during delivery. And then there's all kinds of different subterms, but there is no red dot. There's no other characters. It's important to note that this is related specifically to the delivery. This is a complication of the delivery. So if it was the laceration alone, you would use this other code right here. So that could be a possibility for some other reason, but we're talking about a delivery. So we need a type of delivery. This is the complication, the main kind of delivery, correct? So we're going to do that 070.0 as our main code. Then we're going to look at weeks of gestation and single live-born infant. So if we go back to the notes that I wrote up here, we know I need complications if any, I don't have any. Weeks if known, Z3A is on page 1566. Then I will want, so let's do, give ourselves some time. We're going to do Z3A, and then the next one is going to be Z37 dot something. So let's go look these both up, figure them out. Okay, so Z3A is on page 1566, and we want to see 38 weeks. 38 weeks of gestation. It's going to be Z3A.38. Okay. And then we'll want to see single live born infant. So I want to see Z37 and then see if there's anything else we need to do. It's right here below it. We'll see Z37.0. It's going to be that single live born infant. And this might be another code that you want to just write in your O codes in your chapter over there, because you are going to use it a lot. Once you get into twins and all that, you'll want to make some notes about that as well. But this is definitely going to be the most common, of course. So let's go back to our PowerPoint and see how we did. Okay, so we had delivery complicated by laceration, first degree laceration and delivery, 38 weeks of gestation, single live born infant. So This is going to be that delivery laceration, Z070.0. And then we have the weeks of gestation, which is 38, and Z37.0, which is our single live born infant. So that is tricky, not pretending like it isn't, but you're going to get a lot of situations like this. I'm positive, particularly in your workbook, but you will get at least one or two on the national exam as well. Whenever you are coding yourself, you are going to want to refer to those guidelines every single time and make yourself a ton of notes, because there are so many situations that are just super specific to pregnancy. If you do have any other questions, anything comes up in the homework or on the quiz that you weren't expecting, make a note of it and we can go through those as well. But thank you all for your patience with me. I know this is a long one, and I really appreciate you all. Have a great day. Bye.